Sometimes science fiction can be a disorienting genre. We're often dropped into worlds we know nothing about. We're introduced to characters with otherworldly abilities. We even encounter a species entirely of the creator's imagination. And even if the stories themselves are less zany, they still exist in alternate universes with different rules than our own. So when a work of science fiction sticks more to reality, it stands out.
Because I'd read a lot of space novels and I felt like that was what I was missing. But at the time I remember just thinking, how does it feel? I just felt like there was this emotional side, and I felt like the only way to help the reader to connect with exactly how it would feel and really be able to put themselves in that scenario is to change almost nothing except for that they're in space.
In Temi Oh's debut novel, Do You Dream of Terra Two, she imagines a world almost exactly like the one we're actually living in, with one major difference. Space exploration is a full century ahead of where we're currently at. So when an Earth-like planet, Terra 2, light years away is discovered, humans obviously decide to try and colonize it. The novel follows 6 teenagers and 4 seasoned astronauts who have been chosen by the UK Space Agency to make the journey, which, by the way, is supposed to take 23 years. The book starts off with the astronauts' last day on Earth, and from the get-go, is a tense story.
I was definitely thinking, sort of the moment of the launch is, the highest point of, joy and triumph in their lives, and then they're kind of recovering from it for a long time afterwards.
After it came out in 2019, Terra 2 won an Alex Award, was nominated for a Nomo Award, and received critical acclaim, particularly from outlets like NPR and The Guardian. From there, it launched Temi's career to new heights. She's since written another novel, multiple screenplays, and has more book deals in the hopper. My name is Stuart, and this is Crew Collective, a podcast all about storytelling. Each episode, we explore the stories that help shape us. Books, movies, songs, nothing's off limits. We'll talk to creators about their process, their craft, and the worlds they build. In Season 1, we're exploring space stories. So that's where Temi's novel fits in. And my conversation with her is next.
Crew Collective is brought to you by Rocket Genius, makers of Gravity Forms. Gravity Forms was the first premium WordPress contact form plugin launched in the space over 15 years ago. Since then, brands like NASA, Delta, and Stanford University have relied on Gravity Forms for their WordPress form data. But so have tens of thousands of freelancers, agencies, and small creators, powering payment forms to newsletter signups. For small and large alike, Gravity Forms understands their mission: build amazing software that people trust. Learn more at gravity.com. And we trust you enjoy Crew Collective as much as the team at Rocket Genius did making it.
And now my conversation with science fiction writer Temi Oh about her debut novel, Do You Dream of Terra Two?
I had the idea just before I turned 19, because it was the year I took off before I went to university. I was working at a bookstore, and the author, the manager of the bookstore said, "What are you going to do tomorrow? Today's the last day you're ever going to be 18." I remember just thinking, it's the last day I'm ever going to be 18? And just thinking I was on the cusp of adulthood and leaving all my siblings behind and going to university. And I had this real feeling of loss all of a sudden, even though I'd spent the whole year just so excited to leave everyone behind. So I was thinking about that feeling, and I'd read a couple of space books. And my main question at the time had been how does it feel to leave everything behind? Do they miss Earth? Do they miss their family? It's a real commitment to go on a long journey. So yeah, my idea for Terra 2 kind of came from a mixture of those inspirations. I have these characters who are 18, 19, and they've been picked for this mission, which will take 23 years, to colonize an Earth-like planet. They'll be the first. No one's ever seen, set foot there before. And it starts on their last day on Earth, where they're thinking, what am I going to miss? And a tragedy happens on their last day on Earth. And then the book sort of follows that and their journey.
One thing that jumped out to me that became very clear, I think, pretty early on into the book, and I imagine other readers had a similar experience, was that for as far as science fiction goes, this was a pretty grounded story. I mean, it's the world we live in, I guess, with the one thing being different is that space exploration is a good full century, if not more, ahead of where we're actually at. But other than that slightly altered timeline, this is very, very grounded, which I'm curious about that decision, because I mean, sometimes science fiction can be very disorienting.
Yeah, I think because I'd read like a lot of space novels and I felt like that was what I was missing. I mean, since then, there have been a lot more that have come out that have probably addressed this. But at the time, I remember just thinking, how does it feel? I just felt like there was this emotional side and something about space that makes you think about death, since it's obviously like such an inhospitable place, and loneliness and solitude, but then also this human frontier. I don't know, it just seemed like a really emotionally rich setting, and I felt like the only way to help the reader to connect with exactly how it would feel and really be able to put themselves in that scenario is to change almost nothing except for that they're in space, if that makes sense. So I have all of the same real world references, and is London and the Olympics happen. History is the same, except that, yeah, space exploration is about 100 years more advanced.
I would have not guessed you were that young when you wrote it, just because reading it felt like an adult writing about their early adult years in retrospect. And I guess where I'm going with that is, like, space itself, it's, you know, here they are, they're all amped up, they're ready to go, and then they get there and they're like, well, this is, you know, we like the idea of it, but this is kind of bleak. And the adulthood can kind kind of be like that a little bit too. I mean, in every job, every job in every industry sounds great until you're out into it, and then you're just kind of like, oh geez. So yeah,
I was definitely thinking, like, sort of the moment of the launch is like the highest point of like joy and triumph in their lives, and then they're kind of recovering from it for a long time afterwards. I don't know, maybe I was just a very morbid, like 18, 19-year-old.
Yeah.
I think it probably also comes from the fact that, like, I personally don't have, I like to travel, but like I really don't like to be uncomfortable, and I don't have like that much wanderlust. Like, I feel like my characters are always like, home is the best place, it's good to come home. So I don't know, it's a whole tale that basically says don't bother going to space. Yeah,
well, I mean, it is like pretty intense, and I mean, I think by the time we're introduced to Astrid, I believe it is, or Juno, I think, who was a little more hesitant to go, the twin sisters. You know, Juno was a little more hesitant to go. It's you kind of introduced that conflict pretty early on, when she's feeling like, oh, I'm gonna miss, you know, all these foods we have down here on Earth. I'm gonna not see my family, the routines that I've come to love, and so it sets a pretty tense tone, I think, from the very beginning. I mean, you kind of sense that potential conflict really from second chapter on in.
Yeah, I think I was definitely wrestling with that, like, yeah, the excitement about being the first, but then the regret. Yeah.
How much research went into this? You said you did you know, as a college student, you learned how to do a lot of research. Yeah, how much went into this? I mean, it sounds like you had a pretty good practical understanding of what life would have been like in outer space, and to say nothing of the amount of training and preparation that went into it.
Yeah, I read lots of astronaut diaries, so I was thinking about that. And then because I did a neuroscience, that's kind of a biomedical degree, I'm always just very interested in like the body and how the body responds. And in my final year, we got to choose a module. So I chose, because I was writing this book, I chose to do extreme physiology, which is basically what happens to the body in extreme scenarios. So when you go to space and come back, or if you're diving, or if you're doing a marathon in really hot conditions. And for that, we got to interview someone who was a recruiter for the European Space Agency, and he talked about like how they recruit astronauts and how they train and the effect that going to space and then coming back has on your body. And we also got to go into a human centrifuge, which pilots train on, and it spins your body around so you can experience like a high amount of G-force. So I remember going into that, and they film you while you're in it, and you can see your classmates. And so like right now we're in 1G, and I don't know what the maximum is, but they can crank it up. And I think I got up to like 3.5G when I started to feel really sick. And if you lift your hand up, it feels like 3.5 times as heavy. And you also see your face, it kind of melts. And I remember our course leader saying, like, you'll see how you'll look in the future. Because like there's just like your face is kind of hanging down with this gravity. I was sick for about 2 days afterwards. But that sort of physical sensation of undergoing that acceleration, and then how horrible it felt when it stopped, the like inertia kind of feeling, allowed me to like mentally ground myself in the body of my characters when they're launching into space. So it definitely sort of informed that.
What kind of feedback have you gotten from other like scientists, professionals, maybe astronauts? Like, has anyone like reached out to you and been like
feedback from astronauts? Though
oh
I'd be
no,
very curious.
Yeah,
the head of extreme physiology seemed impressed by it. So the same course leader who took us on this trip. So that was gratifying.
Yeah, I'm always curious, like when someone is kind of blending. Well, like for example, like I read The Martian like a year or so ago, and I liked it, but like it was also just kind of like, all right, well this is a science lesson too, and
it's very technical, that one.
Yeah, and I was more, maybe it's just me being the more creative type. I was more interested in the journey of Mark Watney than I was the palpability of actually living on Mars. Did you struggle with like how much science to include, or the kind of details?
Yeah, I think that always is the hard thing, especially when you go in having done a lot of research. And then you do have to remember that like I've chosen to write fiction for a reason. Fiction is to entertain and to tell a story. And sometimes you'll think, okay, this would make more practical sense or scientific sense, but then does it tell a good story? So I think it's constantly balancing, even just things like, would such mentally unstable teenagers be chosen for this trip? But it's like, well, if they're completely calm in every scenario, then that would be a dull story. So I don't know. Sometimes you have to just make decisions, because you have to remember that like as a storyteller, you're there to entertain, which I feel like there are definitely people who like that. Saying that and saying those priorities is kind of like sacrilegious. Like, no, you have to stay true to the science. But yeah, I think that there's a reason that I chose to write fiction and not sort of science reporting or
Yeah, I mean, speaking of those teenagers, there's also for older adults, I guess, on this mission as well. Did you ever consider writing from their perspective at all, or was it always going to be like, these are the 6 youngsters, they're really going through it, I think more so than the older folks? I'm not even really critiquing that. I'm just curious why.
This is what's so funny about like you saying that you felt like it was someone older writing it, because when I was that age, I just could not imagine how it would feel to be 30 or 40. And like I there are so many scenes where my editor would say, what would the adults say in this scenario? And I'd think, what would they say? I don't know. Now, if I wrote it, yeah, for sure, I'd probably have weaved in their perspective. And in my book that I've written now, Not With a Bang, it's a family saga, and I have both the parents' perspective. But I just genuinely, like at that age, didn't feel like I had the ability to do it at all. Yeah.
I was crunching the numbers at one point and realized I'm probably about the same age as Commander Shepard was.
Yeah.
So, wow.
Yeah, I remember just thinking like, he has a kid. What do people with kids think? And like, yeah. Now I have kids, so I could probably write about leaving your kid behind. Like that's also emotionally rich territory.
Again, just another observation I had. I think one thing that makes Terra 2 such a unique novel is you in some ways get away from the typical hero's journey. I mean, it's there, but I don't even know, are there even like actual heroes and villains in this story? Because it kind of seems to me like we kind of get introduced to a character, we start to like them, and then they do something really awful or annoying. And so there's different at different points, throughout the story. Or at least I found myself attached to some characters at certain points, and then very annoyed by them later on. And that's kind of true to life, though, right? I mean, people we know and like disappoint us, redeem themselves. People we don't like surprise us at times. And I felt like I kind of had that experience with these characters.
Oh, I'm glad that you say that, because definitely as I was writing it, I was trying to bear in mind in each point of view that everyone thinks they're the hero. And then, so I didn't want it to be too clear that like some people were heroes or some people were villains. And I wanted it to be that when you're in their perspective, you can really understand their point of view. But then when you see them from the outside, I don't know, they seem monstrous or mean or selfish. Because I was having a lot of fun with, like, that's the joy of novels in particular, and that you can be in someone's head and on the inside and the outside, which isn't an experience that you can really have any other way.
Do people ever like reach out to you and say like, I really identified with this character or this one? And I found myself drawn to Jesse, even though I don't think he and we don't have the same background at all. I don't know how much we have in common. He just was the character to me that was the most interesting. Do you get that kind of feedback from people?
Yeah, and sometimes it surprises me who people feel like are the main characters or the characters who it's really easy to connect with. Yeah, and I seem to hear like a range of answers. There isn't really just one. Okay.
Interesting. I mean, this might be a loaded question. I'm sure you've gotten it too many times, but who do you feel like you were most connected to?
Yeah, it's funny because, well, definitely at the time I was writing it, I think I felt like probably closest to Juno, and then I felt like Astrid was kind of a little bit. Juno's so I have the twins Astrid and Juno for people who haven't read it, and Juno is like very pragmatic, very type A. She's obsessed with like laws and rules and systems. Definitely, like at the age I was writing it, I had more of that character in me. She's quite judgmental as well, and not very forgiving or sympathetic to other people, which I guess makes her like not always very sympathetic either. But then she's very good at her job. She's very efficient. She's definitely the kind of person that you'd want with you on one of these missions. And then her sister's kind of the opposite. Like her sister's really intuitive and very emotional. She makes decisions that are kind of just sort of like driven more by faith really than like logic. And I guess I just kind of separated out, like kind of made a more extreme version of like what I was at the time, which is like the sort of nerdy science student. And that was Juno. And then something that like I felt like I wanted to be, which is just like, yeah, I guess a little bit able just to make choices that were based on faith alone and not, I've crunched the numbers and this is the right choice to make.
At times, Terra 2 felt like an allegory for religion. The whole idea of leaving everything behind for a destination that may or may not exist. Not obvious, but not subtle either. For a topic that can be as polarizing as religion, Temi handles it with nuance and compassion.
I definitely had that in my mind when I was writing it. I was thinking about a leap of faith and how the journey, to go on the journey is a leap of faith, and also hoping that the reader has to make certain leaps of faith when they're sort of following the characters.
It's a pretty compassionate, you take a pretty compassionate view on religion, which not a lot of people do. I mean, religion's one of those things, there's not a lot of nuance. It's usually people are either kind of come down very much against it or very dogmatically, like, believing in it very rigidly. You kind of found that, again, what felt to me like a pretty good, I won't say middle ground, but you were compassionate towards Astrid, who was pretty gung-ho and really taking a leap of faith.
Yeah, I'm really glad you think that, because I had been thinking that when I was writing it, that definitely in the past sort of like 20, 30 years, whenever I saw a story with like a religious character, it felt like I'd see them represented quite negatively. Yeah, and I have a lot of sympathy for her faith, and that if you're on a really long journey, it might not necessarily, like, all of the characters basically need to have some kind of like belief system. That's the thing that sustains them. And for Astrid, it's this sort of like quasi new religion that she's made. But like, I don't know, for Igor, it's how much he loves space and how he wants to die in space. And Kai, it's like he's very scientific. He believes in what he's doing. I don't know, but I basically think that anyone who wants to do sort of an extreme feat of endurance needs to have some kind of belief system, and that's where they're going to draw their strength from. And if they don't have that, as some of the characters don't, then their ability to endure the suffering will collapse.
I mean, I think the whole idea also of just going and establishing a new Earth brings up a lot of like ideas and themes. And I think there's that one scene where, you know, the teenagers are all hanging out on the Damocles, and Damocles, for the listeners, being the name of this craft that's carrying them to this new planet. And Juno drafts this document that basically kind of lays out the society they're going to live in. And she kind of imagines almost like this communist utopia kind of thing where all there's no private property, everyone's equal, that kind of thing. And I think the idea of utopia in general is such a common theme that you see in science fiction. Were you thinking a lot about utopia when you wrote this, or dystopia maybe?
Yeah, I definitely was thinking about utopia, and if you could start society from scratch, and just like what an amazing, like, I don't know, opportunity it would feel like. But then I guess like how it's kind of a bit tragic anyway, because she's like, we'll get to this new Earth and we'll make a dream society. But they basically do have a society, which is like the group of them on the Damocles, and then it's not they're not making it a dream. Like there are lots of flaws that they're not overcoming, and there are loads of conflict that they're falling into, and it's kind of, so it seems doomed already to think, well, if you can't make this work in this small space, this few people, then how are you going to do it on another Earth in like 40, in 20 years time, when you're in your 40s.
So quick editorial note here. If you don't like spoilers, I'd highly recommend pausing this episode right now. Go back and read the book, and then come back here. The episode will still be waiting for you in your feed, because we're about to spoil the ending. So don't blame me if you don't take heed of this advice.
The ending is actually what came to me with the whole idea. I was like, it'll be their last day on Earth, and we'll never know if they make it. Yeah. And it was really intentional, because I was thinking about faith and belief systems. I really wanted, by the end of the book, for you to like understand the odds, but then love the characters so much that like I was hoping at the end the reader would go, I don't know if they'll make it, but I'm just gonna believe they will. Because like it would be sad to imagine them all dying out there in space.
You're always rooting for characters no matter what they do, I feel like. Yeah, I think it would have been really kind of odd actually had they actually made it. But I bring it up. I found a Reddit thread. I don't know if you ever follow stuff like that, where people were like, I love the book, but I didn't like the ending. But I'm like, I love the ending.
Even my sister was like, so do they make it? And I was like, do you think they make it? And she's like, but though, And I was like, I know what's in the book. That's what I know. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because I always feel like, especially these days, everything goes on too long. Like everything is more seasons than I need it to be. Or I find out the next decade of someone's life, and I really enjoy those stories personally. Maybe this is because I am a writer, where like there's enough space for me to imagine. I feel like that's a gift. That's how I feel. I think I could be in the minority since I consistently get emails saying, "And when's the sequel out?"
But you can really ruin a character with a sequel. I mean, I think like maybe the most the most infamous would be, like, do you really want a character to have an Atticus Finch like story arc where he kind of has, he had a good ending and To Kill a Mockingbird, and then we find out later like what he's become, and you're just kind of like, no, like, why did she do that?
I think so, and I feel like the ones that stick in my head are the ones that I still have some questions about. So yeah, I felt like. Yeah, so I felt sad. I think the thing was knowing that they wouldn't make it, how to make it satisfying was the thing that I was really stuck with. And definitely part of it is just like expectation management. So like throughout the story, I think like one of the first hints they're not going to make it is when I have Astrid's point of view and they launch. And I say something about how it was a dream, something about how it's like the dream to make it to Terra 2, that launch was its highest point of realization. So I was kind of trying to say there, like, this is the best it's going to get for her. This is the closest really she's going to be to achieving her dream.
Well, and she's the one, again, who I think had probably, the broadest arc, in that she's the one who most wanted to go. She did a really, really terrible thing, in my opinion, essentially ruining any real chance the crew had of escaping at one point. I mean, it was a horrible thing to do, and then redeems herself by essentially. And I'm curious why you sent her back to Earth. I mean, she referenced the story of Abraham and Isaac making the ultimate sacrifice, and almost like this bargain she made with God, like, I'll do this if you save my sister. It was really, really sweet and heart-wrenching in some ways. And I mean, that's one of the classic stories, I guess, from the Old Testament. Has that always been special to you?
It's interesting. That's definitely one that's always stuck in my head. Yeah, especially because you learn it when you're a child, but then, or at least I did. I learned it when I was a child in like Sunday school. Yeah, about Abraham being told, sacrifice your son, the one son that you wanted for so long, because like I'm above that for God. And then God sort of at the last moment saying, actually, you don't have to. But I remember just thinking about being Isaac and going up there. And then even if you weren't killed, having the moment where you saw your dad and he genuinely was going to do it. What does that do to your relationship forever? I don't know. I've just always had that in my head. But also just that ask, the like, what is it you love the most? Can you get rid of the thing that you love the most? So when I was getting to the end of the story, initially in the early drafts, I'd had the idea that like Juno goes back to Earth, Astrid goes to space. But then as I was writing it, I realized, no, it has to be the other way around, because Juno is just there because of Astrid. The thing she loves the most is her sister. And the thing that Astrid loves the most is Terra 2. She has to give that up. That's the ending.
What is it like to be in a very like traditional medium in a world that's like, it seems like, I mean, because I struggle with this too. Like, I don't want to say we're being left behind, but it does feel that way sometimes.
I mean, I think it's just worth remembering that like we're part of a really ancient like human endeavor, storytelling and conversations and audio. Like for you, that's like, this is the medium that it's being transmitted to people, but it's like part of satisfying just like a really normal human craving for connection and to hear stories. And that probably isn't something that's likely to change because it's kind of integral.
Yeah, I mean, writing has survived for thousands and thousands of years. It's probably going to continue to do so.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's like on a Kindle or on a screen might be different, but like thousands of years ago, it was sitting around a campfire and telling each other stories. And I think you probably I think you also have children, but I just noticed it like my daughter, how much she wants to hear stories and tell stories. And she'll be like, the cat sat on the bed and I did this. And I think that the medium and the technology around it might change, but we're always going to have this craving to hear a story, and also to hear it repeated is another thing. Like the idea that, there are like some essential stories, and there's a reason why we keep telling the stories over and over again. It sort of like satisfies something inside of us.
Ever since Terra 2 was published, Temi's kept at it. Her second novel, More Perfect, was also well received by critics, and when I spoke to her a while back, she just finished writing her third novel and has a book deal for a fourth. Even though we didn't really touch on it in this conversation, Temi's an award-winning screenwriter. Her short film Murmur won a Broadcast Digital Award, and she's also written for Castlevania on Netflix, a CBBC series called Silver Point, and other stuff you've likely seen, such as Doctor Who, Black Panther, and Overwatch. Still, I'm probably selling her short, so if you go to her website, theonlytemio.com, you can learn more. Even though Do You Dream of Terra 2 is a work of science fiction that takes us well beyond our own galaxy, it still feels close to home. Just like the characters in the book, we've probably all asked ourselves at some point what we'd do if we knew this was our last day on Earth. Maybe we've even imagined starting over or creating our own society from scratch. But this novel gives us a better appreciation for life as we know it, no matter how imperfect it is. Crew Collective is brought to you by Rocket Genius. Our executive producers are Matt Medeiros and Travis Tots. This episode was written, edited, and produced by me. I'm Stuart Barefoot. More episodes are available at crewcollectivepodcast.com or anywhere else you might get podcasts. Next time on Crew Collective.
The real human stories tend to come from those places because we see those kinds of people every day. Some of us are those kinds of people or have done those jobs, and you're just transplanting them to a slightly different situation.